Testing, testing. All right. Yep. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. YouTube. Streaming topics. Gumroad. ZBrush. YouTube. Links. Okay. So we were talking yesterday about making stuff like this really quick. I think we ended up doing some array mesh stuff. Essentially, working with radial symmetry to kind of get these types of sculpts, and using Dynamesh or not using Dynamesh, using things like ZModeler to do this kind of thing. And then this little guy here was just a wheel, and then it was basically like putting a previously made one where you just make an animal, you do some Dynamesh, you do some alphas, all stuff we already talked about, and then using our little parts here, little arm parts, in order to, hey, thanks for showing up. Jarl just kind of doing a little bit of a recap here. Actually, we can do a full recap. Let's do that. So I'm going to go all the way back up here. So we talked about putting together the concept sculpt, making some shirts and pants and fishnet type things, and going into Painter and painting on those kind of things, extracting weapons really quickly to give us a base to work on. Refining these things is going to be most of it, and I'm not going to bother covering it here because a lot of it, if you go to my YouTube playlists, is covered under the ZBrush 4R8. Well, that too, but also the pistol series. There it is, Sci-Fi Pistol series right here. So there's that, and also the animation stuff we may get to today. You know what? I forgot to copy down a file that I might have to wait till tomorrow. So then, and all this other Painter stuff, like throwing your rapid prototype concepting stuff in a Painter. We talked about also in the Sci-Fi Pistol series. And so anyway, we talked about, throwing together these little guys here and making your custom insert mesh brushes and using alphas and Dynamesh to create this type of thing. And then this guy's like a hybrid, and this is just ZModeler stuff. Just going through and like making this stuff. And you can use ZModeler, Dynamesh at this point. You can always rebuild. It's not that big a deal. And then going in there and doing like animation stuff here just to kind of test out functionality. And like I mentioned at the ZBrush Summit, it'd be awesome if you could like do parent hierarchy parenting and then setting pivots so that you could on the ZBrush timeline set that up and do some really complex animations. So maybe with their folder system they will. Now we're getting into stylized rendering. So like I mentioned before, if you go to www.zbrushguides.com, this is Pablo Munoz Gomez's website here, and you can go through here and you can say, hey, take me to your tutorial ebooks, and you can go check those out. He's got a lot of free ebooks in here, and the one we're talking about specifically, I can link you guys to this, is the ZBrush Stylized Comic Render. I'm not going to go over this because if you go to my YouTube channel and you go down here to the ZBrush Guide Stylized Rendering playlist, I'll link you to that too. There you go. We already went through it. So we went through the PDF step by step, real time on the live stream, and just like this live stream that I'm doing now, I'm going to edit it down and divide it up and organize it so you can kind of click through it and just go through that information. But we will do a quick demo just because, I do bring it up here. Like here's my concept sketch and then here's my little stylized render. So very quickly we can show that off. Yes, Video No Man says, more streams, who are you and where are the real Michael? I know I've been really slacking on my streams, especially September was a really bad month for me. But, I'm trying to get the ZBrush Summit content out so I can organize it this weekend and put it up. Probably throw it on ArtStation so you guys have a little bit easier access to it, and put it on my YouTube channel, of course. And I'm going to try to be more consistent. What I'm going to try to do, the most consistent I can be for sure, is doing like the first Tuesday of the month on Pixelogic, the first Thursday of the month on my channel, and then any supplementary stuff we'll figure out as we go. But let me go to Streaming Summit Demos, and this one actually has Stylized Rendering. We'll open up Crawley. So if we open up our little Crawley creature here, he's showing up good? Okay. And I assume you guys can hear me okay. So we've got our little Crawley creature here. We can turn on perspective, and if we want to just render this guy out in ZBrush, we can also, I like to turn on the floor. The floor automatically snaps to the lowest part of your subtools, not necessarily the visible subtools. It'll snap to the lowest part of your biggest subtool, visible or not. But because my lowest subtool here is visible, it looks like he's standing on a floor, which is nice. Because if we go to the draw menu here, that's because the elevation is set to -1, I'm sorry. If you set it to 0, it'll snap to world 0, but I'm going to set this to -1, so it always snaps to my lowest point here. Now, I'm going to do some really rudimentary basic rendering. If I hit the BPR render, I'm going to see the floor captures that shadow down here, which is nice. You can, if it's too small, and sometimes it is, you can go here to draw, and you're going to see the grid size. Sometimes your grid size will be small depending on the scale that you're working at in ZBrush. You can change that grid size as big or as small as you want to. I'll set it back to 3, and then that'll just, again, act as your shadow catcher. I'm not going to go heavy into, let's call it good ZBrush rendering. We'll touch on a little bit of stuff, but if you want to go deep dive, I got you covered. ZBrush image-based lighting. We'll take you through a bunch of ZBrush image-based lighting stuff, and this goes more in depth on that. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Glad you could make it too, Mim. So we can get very nice renders. You can go through here. We have matte caps. We have standard materials. You can make your own matte caps if you go through the matte cap material video that I linked you guys earlier. You can adjust these materials in here. Let's go ahead and say, I'm going to take this material window. I'm going to go in here to modifiers. You also see there's a wax modifier in here. So if you wanted to, excuse me, give me a second. Sorry, my throat's a little dry. Always the end of September, early October, I get destroyed in Austin. So I do have a doctor's appointment. See an allergist on October, late October, so I'm excited for that. But and I don't want to alarm anybody, but it is right now 56 Patriot units in Texas right now. I don't know what that is in Celsius, but that's pretty cold for where I'm at. So anyway, we got this thing rendered. Right now it's using a matte cap gray. If we do have this material selected, incidentally, let's see if we have, just like when you're poly painting, if you turn on these colorized things here, if you can, I'm going to alt tap this. If you turn this off, you can see you can alt tap this, and you can see these are little highlighted areas here. So you can always go in here and you can paint. You can turn on RGB for a standard brush, turn off Z-add. You can poly paint. This is just basic ZBrush functionality. I'm not going to bore you too much with this, but we can change it to like a drag dot. Let's give it a little star alpha. Let's take that focus shift down to -100. Let's make this red or green, and it's going to inherit, by default, if you have colorize off, it's going to inherit this color. So you can kind of preview it like this. It'll also inherit a new material. If you just hover over this, it'll show you your selected subtool with that material on it. And up here is matte cap. That is material capture. The lighting is baked into these materials. And in fact, if you go up to the lighting menu, the lights don't really, like if I move this light around, it doesn't really affect the object. In fact, the only thing it does affect is where the shadow is cast after I hit BPR. BPR is your best preview render. So now the shadow is being cast in a slightly different direction. So we have in material and lighting and what else? Rendering all work together. All of these things work together to create the final image that you see on your screen. Now ZBrush is a real-time program, so the matte caps allow you to see very complex, looks like complex shader operations in real time because again it's baked in. So you can see these things update on the fly. And of course you can go in here and change these properties. So again, if we go up to our, so you see I have a startup material here. You also have matte cap gray. So I have matte cap gray. I like to work in matte cap gray. You may like to work in red wax. That's the startup material, or whatever you want to do. A green metallic's also a very popular one. So let's say I really like to work with matte cap gray. I can select that one. And then in here, you now have a save as startup material. So if you always want to start that up, then just go ahead and select that one. So yeah, we're going to talk about poly painting. So Of course, we have our matte cap material is covering our object, colorizes off. Now, as soon as I start painting with this, let's say I want to put a red star in here, it's going to turn it red, but by default, the vertex color on this object is going to be white. So when I drag this out, you're going to see it's going to kind of leave a little graphical glitch behind and put a red star on it. If I just turn the camera slightly, it's going to update and be like, oh, okay, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to poly paint on this object. So what I'm going to do for you is turn colorize on, and that's underneath poly paint here. Colorize. And then now when I start dragging out, I'm going to turn off L for lazy mouse, turn that off. And now I can start dragging out these red stars. Or I can change this to a drag rect, and I can drag out stars like this. Or I can change my color, and I can drag out stars like this. You're going to see these colors updated, but that's because colorize is turned off. Now if I want to turn colorize on for all of my subtools, I can hold down shift, touch that colorize, that turns it off for everything, hold down shift, touch colorize, turns it on for everything. Now it just turns everything white because again, the default vertex colors are white by default. But now if I alt tap on this one and I start dragging, now I'm going to color on that. Of course, you can change your drag rect stroke to drag dots or freehand. And you can simply, if I turn lazy mouse back on, and let's alt tap this one, you can kind of just drag through. It's also got pressure sensitive. You can go thin to thick to thin, and it'll fade out as well. And you can go in here to your stroke. If you do have lazy mouse turned on by tapping L, you can crank that lazy radius up, and now it'll go through and like stamp stars intermittently. And you can also do Z-add as well. So if you turn on RGB and Z-add, and I go through here and I start painting, it'll go through and it'll stamp, or you can hold down Alt. Now if I hold on Alt, it's going to press in, but it's going to do my secondary color. So if I want to change that, I can touch that one. Let's say we can go into pink, hold down Alt, and now it'll stamp inwards pink. Now generally speaking, I only use poly painting for material IDs, but you can of course paint. You can paint through Spotlight faces. We've gone through this in previous. Oh boy, let me see if I can find this one. This will be a tough one. You go to my channel and you search for poly paint, maybe. We've talked about like poly painting faces through Spotlight. This one kind of covers it, Spotlight reference modeling, but we have gone through in earlier live streams and like taken this guy's head and then brought in like 3DSK images of people's faces. Ideally, you're going to have a polarized image so it gets rid of the specular on the face and you can just paint your albedo information onto your, say, your stylized face or your high-res face that you're trying to match. And then you can bake that poly paint off to a texture at any point. And maybe we'll get to that too. That's going to be in your texture create here. You can say create new from poly paint. So if you have poly paint information on here, you can convert that to a texture map if it has UVs. Now, you have to, poly painting is a vertex operation. You're essentially filling an object, a vertex with a vertex color. So if we have a cylinder 3D here, we can go to edit mode and we go into make polymesh 3D and we go to geometry or subtool, I'm sorry, and turn on colorize. So we just have a white cylinder here. That's a polygon that we can manipulate. So with our standard brush with Z add-on, we can sculpt on it. If we turn on RGB, however, we want to paint, you're going to see, oh yeah, we're painting green here because this is our primary color selected. You can paint green and you can sculpt green. If you turn Z add off, you're going to see we can paint, but it's very, very low res. That's because it's only going to be able to paint green for that vertex. However, we hit Control D, which is going down here to subdivide. You're going to see we're getting more resolution, and now we're able to paint very high res. And if you want to sample a color, you can tap C anywhere in your interface. If you want to tap C up here, you can grab that orange, paint with that orange. If you want to tap C in here, it'll grab white. So you can go through here and you can poly paint like this. Poly paint can also work with the Z plugin Poly Group It. I'm probably not going to cover that today, but if you want more information on that, if you go to my playlist here, you can go and check out ZBrush 418, ZBrush 2018, 4R18, ZBrush 2018, what's new. And in here, there's all sorts of cool new stuff that's in ZBrush 2018, and Poly Group It's right there, 45. And then how to use Poly Group It to do like hard surface armor type thing. So we're painting with color. We can also paint with material. So because I haven't assigned a material to this object, it's just kind of sitting there. because I've only been using RGB. If I'd been using mRGB, I'd also be painting with the material, but since I haven't, I can go through here and switch this to other materials. So we can say we like this material. Let's go to color. You can fill an object with a color. So I can fill it completely with like red, or I can take my RGB intensity, drop it down, and I can fill it with like 20% red. Give it a little tint. I can keep filling it with that color, or I can go to white and keep filling it with that color to kind of knock it down a little bit. You can also, if you have M selected, you can go to color fill object, it'll fill it with that material. So now when I select a new material, it's not going to update because it is filled with the material. Now if I do go up here and turn off colorize, it will update the material as well as the color because the vertex color has been turned off and now it's just acting like a default mesh that had this colorize turned off because that's frankly what it is. So we've got all this. If we want to paint with a material, we can go through here, we'll grab another one, we'll do poly skin, and we'll give this just a white color. And I can go through here with M selected, I'm simply painting on the material. I can go through here, we'll do reflected red. And so now we're painting with materials and RGB. You may notice that the material doesn't have a nice fall off like vertex color does. It's just basically on or off. So one thing you can do, you can't really fix that because it is like this face, this triangle either has this material or it doesn't. But when you go to BPR render, you can go up here to your render settings. Let's see if I remember where this is. Render properties. And I'm never really in here enough. Material blend radius. So if I crank this up, if you hold down control, does it really give us any more information? No, not really. Let's set this to 1. Or, let's crank it up to 2. And now when we BPR render, you're going to see it's going to kind of blur that transition through there. So you can keep cranking that up and that'll smooth that transition between those 2 or 3 materials in this case. So that's one way you can use that to kind of mitigate that aliasing. The other thing you can do is you can hit Control D or keep subdividing so that as your polygons get smaller, those little stepped alias points will also get smaller. So around 2 million, it's pretty sharp. It's not too taxing on your eyeballs with that aliasing. So I don't know, you can use that. Now if you want to sample, again, sample color, you can just hover over your object and you can hit C and it'll sample the underlying vertex color. Or you can drag from the color on here and it'll sample the color. If you want to sample a material, just click and drag off the material and it'll go through, here's a red, here's a poly paint, there's a metal, and then it'll select your material. So basics of materials in here. Let's go through here. I'll turn colorize off on this thing. We'll go back to our little spider guy and hold down shift, turn off colorize. And now we'll just choose a white and we'll go back to I'll start a material or matcap gray in your case. So we've got this here and we want to do a BPR render. And of course our floor is off, so we're not going to be able to catch that shadow, but let's go ahead and turn on that floor plane. And let's say we want to control a little bit more of the material settings. So we can go over here and we have material, start material. You can go down here to modifiers. This one's pretty simple. It's just S1. S2, S3, and S4 are shader things that stack on top of each other. So in here you can change like your depth A, your intensity of your A, and your A and your B is like, I believe, like if we go to matcap red wax, this has an A and a B in here. So you can go through here and you can change like the intensity of A and the intensity of B, and you can kind of mix between those two to get whatever look you're going for. Also the depth, and then we go more in depth in this on the video, by the way. So you can change these as much as you want. Now and you can also go through here and you can see how this has two little shader balls. If we say grab this one right here, you can put any texture in here and get any effect you want. If we put the eyeball in there, that's the effect we'll get. It's essentially using this texture as baked lighting. So feel free to like import your own texture, even from Photoshop. If you make a circle and paint it in, or you go and grab a render from another program and it's rendered on a sphere and you bring it in as a texture, you can use that and then it will light your object based on that shader ball that you import. Of course, you can paint that. You can use an image. You can even just use a regular old texture. It'll work, and you'll get some really cool effects. But if you want to control it, you can also make your own matte caps by going into the lighting menu, and there is a light cap, so you can create your own matte caps with diffuse and specular. Again, I'm not going to go into that just today, but there's a lot of really cool functionality in here I don't want you guys to miss out on. But anyway, go to our startup material, you can play with those settings. Now those are matte cap settings, so you're changing your material capture, you're changing your real-time baked lighting materials. These ones down here are standard materials. So if I go over here to like the basic material, you're going to see again, we just have S1 activated. But here you can like make sure the diffuse is all showing up 100%. You can change your specularity, so you can crank that up, it'll make it shinier. You can go all the way down here and change it from a Fong to a blend on that specular. You can also go to the specular curve. This is the fall off, so if I make this, it's going to make it look more matte. And if I change it smaller, it's going to tighten up that specular and make it look wetter. So you can use that to kind of dictate. A lot of reflectivities in here. If you want to, you can bring in a texture. And we'll put in like this little cloud texture here. And I believe, again, it's been a while since I messed around with this stuff, but like reflectivity, if we start cranking that up, that'll start reflecting that texture we have loaded in here. So I can load in like that star texture, it'll start reflecting that star or that world, whatever texture you want it to reflect. You can go ahead and plop that in here and turn up your reflectivity. What else we got in here? High dynamic range you can change. You can put in colors in here for like if you put in a red into the diffuse and then you say go into the colorized diffuse, you can start piping in some of that red color into your diffuse. And if you want to stack these things like S1, 2, S3, S4, go in here and there's double, tri, and quad shader. So for example, if I go to quad shader, it has S1, S2, S3, and S4. These ones are turned off. Oh wait, no, they're actually turned on. If you want to turn them off, you can go through here and you can just close them off. And now you just have S1 selected, so you can make this whatever properties you want. I'll turn that specular down and go to specular curve, and we'll make that a little flatter. So we'll say we want to stack these material settings with S2. So we'll go ahead and turn S2 on. And now we're essentially, if we scroll down here underneath the mixer, we're mixing S2 and S1 with replace. You can go through here and you can be like, I want to do a screen operation to mix those two, S1 and S2 together. And there's all sorts of things you can mix around in here and make it even cooler. And then any properties you have in S2, you can say, you know what, I want to put a texture in here. I want to crank up my reflectivity, and I also want to make this diffuse blue, and I want to go and colorize my diffuse 100%. So now if I turn off S2, you're going to see what that shader is doing. It's screening those properties on top of this S1. And you can go down here to the mixer and you can knock down the effect or change it from a screen to a difference and get you a different effect or an add. All those things are going to create a different effect. And with the basic materials, if I go into the light menu and go up here, and I can say, I can move the light around and my object will update because the light is actually affecting it. Now, if I move this orange dot around, it's going to move where the light direct is coming from. If I tap the orange dot, it's going to send it around behind the object, and now you can kind of put in a little rim light on the side here. If I tap it again, I'll bring it around to the front. You can also stack light, so I'm going to turn on this light here. If you just touch it, it selects it, but it's not visible. I got to touch it again, click it. Now it's on, and now I've got another light to control. And on this light, you can also go into like light properties. You can turn shadows on and off for it. You can go into background. This is where you can bring in your HDRI images and use high dynamic range images to do image-based lighting, IBL, essentially having an image, just like when we were in Painter with iRay, we had an image loaded up, and as we rotated the environment, the lighting changed on your object. That's using an image to light your object using image-based lighting. So we have our light put in here. We can change our light properties. We can change the intensity. I'm going to put like a blue light in here. So as we move this secondary light around, it's a blue light. You can make the intensity very intense, or you can make it very low and very subtle. It's up to you. And again, you can stack these as much as you want, turn shadows on and off. And now when we BPR render, we've got two lights. The second light isn't going to cast a shadow. So again, we're just going to have one shadow cast. If you want to start changing light properties, you got light properties in here. And again, we've already talked about material properties. You can change those. And also, of course, you can change your render properties. Again, all three of these menus work together to create your final image. So you can go into your BPR. Every time you hit BPR, it's throwing information into your render passes. So you can just click these and export these as PSDs. So your shaded, your depth here, you can use this to like do a lens blur in Photoshop. And again, I think I cover all this in the image-based lighting thing, but you can export this as a depth map. You can use this in Photoshop to do a lens blur, so you can just like click on your object and it'll kind of blur it out. You can also do, here's your shadow pass. Ambient occlusion is turned off, so if you want to render ambient occlusion, you got to go up here under render properties, turn it on, and then you can go into AO and be like, you know what, I don't want it blurred that much. I want to do more raise in resolution to get a higher resolution AO. You can turn down the strength of the AO. So now if I render this, now if I had just left it here and not touched it, it would if you don't touch your object, it'll re-render what you did previously. So if I just tap here and it turns it off and I hit it again, it'll render really fast because it's just putting your previous BPR right back on your object. However, if I rotate it or move it, now it's going to re-render everything. But now when I render, we have our shadow pass, we have our AO pass here, and now it's all rendering this. So feel free to change any of these properties. You can go into your shadow and you can say, and again, I cover this all in another material or the other playlist, but you can blur out your shadow. You can change the resolution to kind of blur your shadow a little bit, turn down your global strength, all that good stuff. Now, if you want to composite, again, you in like Photoshop or wherever, you can go through here and export these. You can also use Z plugin, ZBrush to Photoshop. If you click this top button, you can watch a video on how to use it. You can also click through here. It'll give you a little overview on how the Photoshop file is set up. If you're having problems with Photoshop being recognized for the JSX file that it uses, go through here. It'll tell you how to fix that. And I think that's it. You can also, under the rendering menu, you can go down here to BPR filters. And now within ZBrush, you can kind of do Photoshop behavior in here. So by default, every time you hit BPR, these BPR filters are going to be active. If you don't have BPR, anything you do in here isn't going to show up. Like we're putting noise on there right now, but it's not showing up. You have to hit BPR because these are all post-process. So you're processing your BPR render, and now post-process, these filters are going to show up. So F1 is noise. You can send it to replace, or you can do like a multiply of that noise, and that'll multiply noise through your rendered image. You can change it from noise to blur, and we can make this back to, try lighten. So now we can kind of blur our image out, and that blur can be based on, it's a 50 blur, so we can crank that up to 100. And now it'll blur a little bit more. You can tell it where to blur. You can tell it if you want it to only blur on the Fresnel or where the shadows are, or where the shadows aren't. So -1 would be where the shadows aren't. -1 would be where the shadows are. So it'll mask where the shadow pass went. And then when you hit BPR, it'll blur everything within your shadows. So you can tell exactly where to blur, how much to blur. You can also stack these effects. So we have blur on F1. If we go to F2, we can say we'll put noise in there. So now we have blur and noise going at once. So we can hit BPR, and then of course those will show up. Of course, you don't have to keep hitting BPR. You can just throw it in there. And let's say if we go over here to our shadow, let's say shadow -1, and we hit BPR. So we can keep stacking these things. We'll throw here's a sharpen, and I'm just going to leave the defaults on here. So we can sharpen, and now it's sharpening up. We can set sharpen to 100, and you're going to see it's going to overcrank the sharpening. We can set sharpen to only be either in the shadows or not in the shadows. So as we change these, you can see when I put it not in the shadows, all of this gets sharpened. If I put it just in the shadows, just in my shadows is getting sharpened. So a lot of really cool post-process stuff you can do in ZBrush. You can posterize in here. Let's change this to like, you can posterize X low, low, posterize, and this will kind of, you can also do stylized. Boy, I'm getting way more in depth than I really wanted to here, but you can also go into your material here. And we'll turn on S1, we'll turn off S2 just to make it a little simpler to see what's going on. You can also go into your diffuse curve, and you can set this to, you can change your focal shift here and get different properties. You can go through here and you can offset this. You can also put in tiling. So as I go through here, let's say if, you know what, tiling, well, you know, you can tile your object and that's fine, and your curve will do this. You can also crank up the strength. Now, when I crank up the strength, you're going to see steps becomes available. So you can actually go through here and posterize on the fly how many steps you want to get like a stylized ink render between strength and steps. You can say how many posterized steps, you know, how posterized, how many colors you want it to step through before you go from your specular to your shadows. All of that can be used in conjunction with BPR and your BPR filters to arrive at a final image that you may want to throw into like a comic book or something. Now, because I have thoroughly done some really wacky stuff in ZBrush without really thinking about it, you can go to Preferences, Initialize ZBrush, but I'm just going to do a fresh restart and get caught up on my comments here because I've been talking for a long time. Morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Do you prefer to paint in ZBrush as opposed to Substance Painter? Like I said, I usually do a color fill. I like to keep objects separate, so when I'm doing my material IDs, I can just fill little separate objects in my scene with a full color, and then in Painter, it kind of depends on what I'm making. If I'm doing like creature stuff, let me show you that real quick. So for example, if I go in here, where would I have that? Intro, sample files, reptile creature. So for example, in my YouTube series, if you go to Intro to ZBrush Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, you might have seen this reptile here that I did in, what shader is that thing using? That's weird, Sketch Gummy. Let me see if I hit BPR on this thing. So if I'm doing like creature type stuff, I love poly painting my creature stuff. And I'm trying to think. So one thing you can do with materials, I'm glad this happened. You can go in here to Z plugin, and you can go into Subtool Master, and under here you can go to Fill. Now this thing is like turning colorize off, turning colorize on. Again, you can just hold down Shift and do that. It's not a big deal. You can also go in here and fill it with a color, or a material, or a color and material, and it'll fill every single one of your subtools with whatever you have selected. So I'm going to fill this skin shader material on every single one of these. There we go. So now I can go into my skin shader material properties, and I'm going to see if I can't get this to show up a little bit better for you guys. Here, and modifiers, yeah, let's crank that diffuse up. So here's that creature, and then in here I just went through, and you can mask by cavity. So if I alt tap this one, turn off Shift, and let's go back to our starter material. You can go through here, and in the masking, you can go through here and you can say, you can mask by features. You can also go down here and say mask by cavity. If you hit mask by cavity, it'll go through and evaluate your mesh. So now you can see it masked all the little indented parts. Of course, you can change this cavity profile to give you more or less of that effect. So if you control drag to unmask and then mask by cavity again, you can do that. Also, remember when we were doing the pistol with the it was like the pistol on the plane, and then we were masking by color intensity, and then we were doing a mask adjust. You can do that as well. So you can take that blur down, change your mask adjust profile. We'll change this focal shift, hit adjust, and you can adjust your mask based on that. So you can go through here and you can knock down, or you can add, or you can subtract. Let's see if we can hit reset. We can get it to do something here. You're not really getting to do much, but you can adjust after you've done your mask. You can adjust that using this mask adjust here. With this, you can now go through here, and when I'm poly painting with masking, what I'll do is I'll turn off view mask. It's still there, so you got to be careful that you don't click off and then forget that that's on and go on here and start trying to like sculpt on it. And it's like, why is it doing sculpting like that? That's bizarre. And it's like, oh yeah, I have my mask turned on. So you got to turn your view mask back on. But if you want to, you can go through here. We can turn colorize back on. And now we've got this colorized thing. So you can see I colored in between to like fill this with like a dirt color here. And then I can go through here and I can like start painting in my cavities. Let's turn off, let's turn on RGB. Start painting here, and it'll leave my cavities alone, or I can control tap. And you know what? Let's go back to our standard brush, turn on RGB. We'll drop our RGB intensity down, and I'll go through here. You can sample. You can either drag off from the color and sample, or you can just hover over and click. So if I want to lighten those cracks up a little bit, if I control tap, it'll invert the mask, but it turns visibility back on. So I'm going to turn that off again. Wait. Yeah, turn that off again. And now when I start painting in here, I can go in here and I can lighten up where the cracks are. So I can kind of go through here and kind of paint a little more dirt in those cracks. Now, all of this, of course, can be done in Substance Designer two ways. Number one, you can mask by the exact same thing. You can mask by a cavity, and then because you bake out a cavity map in Painter, and then you can paint in the cavities on a separate layer. It'll be less destructive, so you'll be able to go in and go, let me adjust the hue of my crack paint, essentially what I'm painting here. So it's very much less destructive. You can kind of do some of that in ZBrush if you go into your brush settings here, and you go down to, say, alpha and texture. There's poly paint mode, so by default standard, but if you want to say like multiply orange over this, you can actually paint in a multiply type way or a colorize, kind of like when you're painting in Photoshop. You can change this poly paint mode to multiply, light, and darken, standard, colorize. So we'll keep that standard. So yeah, when I'm doing creature stuff, I do like to poly paint. But yeah, if I'm doing like wear and tear and paint flaking over another material, I'll just do that in Painter. So anyway, here's this little guy. And if you do watch that series, you know, I can hit BPR and I can turn the floor on and it'll cast a shadow on the floor. But if you want to do like a product render or a keyshot render, you can go in here to rendering, and you can go down here to external render, and you can turn on keyshot. You can hit BPR, it'll send it over to keyshot. That, I have a really long playlist. Go to my YouTube channel. There is this keyshot to ZBrush bridge quick start. That'll take you through a lot of different variations. Also, on my Pavlovich workshop for ZBrush, I'll link you to that. And I'll also link you to my playlist here. Disable polymer, whatever that means. So my Pavlovich workshop here, if you scroll down, you'll see a big glass of beer. So we kind of did similar stuff. We put like beer in bubbles somewhere. Boy, was it that long ago? Didn't feel like that long ago. Time flies. Enjoy every moment, everybody. Yeah, somewhere in here. There it is. Geez. Episode 29. So in here, we go through and we like model a mug. In here, we use bridge, and then we put nano mesh bubbles inside the liquid, and then we take that into keyshot. We put a little foam on the top, and then we render out a little glass of beer there. So there you go. You'll see the little Ryzen Threadripper. That's what I'm using today. I'm on the what am I on now? So I was on the 1950X last year, and then I upgraded to the 2990WX, and so that's what I'm using today to do all this stuff. And ZBrush is a very CPU-based program. Surprisingly, most modeling programs, it uses the GPU and the viewport to do that, but ZBrush uses your CPU quite a bit. In fact, if you go to Preferences and you go down here to Performance, this should all be done by default, but you can test your multi-threading and do multi-threading optimization to make ZBrush perform a little bit better, depending on what you're rocking. So yeah, poly painting, rendering. Let's get back to what we were doing before, which was stylized. So if we go back here to our streaming summit demos, it's going to be a short one. Again, I said it was going to be a short one, and then I went off on another long tangent. So we've got our object in here. I'm going to switch to our startup material with a white. You can do all the material property changes you want to. Now, if you want, I'm going to choose a material I don't like, because when I grab this next material, it's going to override that material. So I'm going to say, you know what, this outline is pretty cool, but I'm not going to use it today. So I'm going to go over here to my comma key. Well, you can go in here and you can say load, and it'll load up a Z material. Wherever you have those, you can also put those in here into your, for example, I have material, and then I have a comic style rendering folder. How I was able to do that is, number one, I went to ZBrushGuides.com and downloaded them with the PDF. But you can also put them in ZBrush 2018. Z materials, you can put any materials you create in here. Every time you change a material, you can say material save, and it'll save the material. You can also put it in a folder if you want, and then these are all the materials in here. And then when I hit the comma key, I can simply go to the material tab, double click on that folder, and I can load these up. So here's the super shader that he set up. So here's your ink outline. You can again hit BPR and mix your shadow settings with this outline here. You can also, if you go over to your materials, you can turn on, well, S3 isn't turned on, so I can turn on S3, and that'll give you a little bit more of a heavier ink fill look. And now when I hit BPR, you'll have shadows mixed with your ink fill. And of course, you can export these into Photoshop and continue painting. That's essentially what I did here, was, take these into Photoshop and just, mess with your settings and just go through and paint variants, and you can update details. And of course, you don't have to do stylized rendering. You can just render this out with metal or take it into Painter or whatever you want to do, and then paint on top of that, decals and scratches. And so, this is just if you want to like get a quick line drawing. This is an easy way to do that. Of course, you can change all these properties however you'd like. And you can also go in here and you can make it look like there's a Batman style here. So you can make it look a little bit more like Batman. And of course, you can create your own in ZBrush or in Photoshop. We can give him more of like a little, there's a green one I like a lot. Looks like a little shiny Hulk. So all sorts of cool stuff you can do to quickly get you like comic book style render. Tony Leonard, always bring him up when stylized rendering comes up. So here is my Pavlovich workshop. If you go to the Pavlovich workshop and you click on Pixelogic ZBrush and you go to their playlists and you scroll down, there's a lot of really good people who stream. Hey, there's me. I'm one of them. And you can go through here and click on everybody, just watch them do stuff, 3D printing and creature creation, all that good stuff. And then in here, you can find Tony Leonard, and he does a lot of this rendering and then also taking it into Photoshop and, putting dots and stuff in it, and does a lot of cool brush stuff. So check those guys out. How often do you use ZModeler? Every single day. In fact, for most things I do now, we were talking, and then we're going to get to that now-ish, yeah. So here's where we were walking through the different variants, and here's a little Ed 209 version. I'm going through it here, and here's our really quick, gross, Dynameshed alpha stamped version of this guy. So when we get him in to Unreal, the animators can kind of set up base animations for him, and he can just walk around. And again, we're just talking base functionality. This is a quick, gross painter pass that I did just to get him representative in game. All the lighting effects and stuff will go in Unreal while you're in the game. So all the shiny lights and boom, having those turn on is all done later. But it's just to get something in game that's like, okay, I get what this thing is. Is it reading correctly in game? Do I need to make his rockets bigger? Do I need to make them red? Do I need to make his armor shiny or less shiny or brighter or darker? Because, it all comes into play on how this thing reads in game, in context, while you're fighting him or playing with him or whatever the case may be. So this is just, again, that quick concept sketch before we get to the refine stage. So while I'm doing this, just like we were doing yesterday when we were putting the jet together, I use a mix of Dynamesh for just Dynamesh shapes and clipping. Oh, speaking of, if you go to my YouTube channel, this one's kind of an older one. If you go to my live stream highlights and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's load more. God, I got too many videos, man. There's a hard surface excerpt in here. This goes through a lot of ways you can use ZModeler or sculpting and use those in conjunction with other tools in ZBrush to kind of, link you to that, to kind of create hard surface shapes. So there's a lot of stuff in there. And there's also, as well in here, under my playlist, there's more techniques in here. Here's the concepting techniques. These ZBrush mech helmet techniques are pretty old. I would watch the ZBrush 2018 and ZBrush 4.8 what's new, and also the Sci-Fi Pistol series has a lot more hard surface techniques. So, and ZModeler's in there as well. So I use ZModeler a lot when I'm just concepting stuff out, just like this guy. Let's go back to our starter material here. This is a mix of insert mesh brushes that I made. I went through here, and it's really gross. Like, I go through here with my insert mesh brushes and just inflate them just to make them thicker. I'm not worried about, oh, how does it smooth on a subdivision surface? I don't care about that. I care about the forms first, and then I can always make decisions on how to clean these up later. Now, ideally, yeah, sure, you would drop in the finished version, and then you're done. And if that's the case, then absolutely you should do that. But a lot of times here, I'll just grab a panel, I'll ZModeler on it, and then I'll change it to a Dynamesh and stamp some alphas on it just to get some shapes going like this thing here. It started out as ZModeler, then I dynameshed it. However, if we did go like we did yesterday, let's go to mech here, and we'll say view details, start groups. You know what? Let's load up the bake file. Go out of solo mode here. Oh, you know what? This is an old bake file. So, okay, this is fine. So here's my material IDs. If I turn this colorize off, you're going to see this is the sketch that I made. And this is just, again, it's a mix of ZModeler and just miscellaneous parts and these gross alpha stamp things. However, if I load in my, I hope I have it. Oh, here we go. Here's the actual big file. So again, this is my concept sketch that goes into game, very quick. And then this one, if I turn off colorize, this is the final stuff. And all of this stuff is super, if I go through here, this is the bake file, so the live booleans have been processed and all that good stuff. But you can see it's much, much cleaner. And if I load up the start groups, this is my working file, and almost 100% of this thing is ZModeler. Wait for it. And it's got a lot of subtools, so bear with me. And in fact, just to make this easier, I'm going to go, so here's this file with everything set up. It's got dynamic subdivisions turned on, and it also has live booleans. If I turn live booleans on, you're going to see those cut in, and I've got it all organized in here. So if you go to ZBrush 408 What's New, that'll tell you all about the live booleans and whatnot. So, however, if I turn live boolean off and I go to merge visible and I drop in here, this is all ZModeler, 100% ZModeler to arrive at, I'm going to skip down here a little bit. We're going to skip refining characters. This right here is 100% ZModeler. In fact, this whole file right here, if I go to load tool, this is my start groups file. This is only 16 megabytes. This is almost a nothing file. There's not a lot going on in here as far as polygons and a lot of intense things. It's just very, it looks complex, and you turn on dynamic subdivisions, it looks like it's a million billion polygons. But in reality, and you have array meshes and stuff we'll talk about later, but it is fairly simple. The most complex stuff is probably this thing, and that's mostly just because it's an insert mesh brush that I repeated. So it's got like the bullet in there, and then it's got like the Apache helicopter ammo feed that goes to this little barrel over here that I took from my commander, and then it goes into this kind of a modified Apache gun. And you can see here the array mesh and the nano meshes that I put on this guy are disappeared because I merged, but in the original file, it's not. So yeah, all of this, here's a little cartridge back here sticking out. So all of this is just ZModeler. Oh, you know what? I should bring those files over. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. Note to self. Wait, streaming topics. Copy over cartridge. I might even have it. And console. Cool. So yeah, ZModeler all the time. Oh boy. In which tab these modifiers are. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm scrolling way back through my comments here. Is there a way to switch fast blend modes? That I'm not sure about either. Can you show how you figured out the design of the legs? Basically like inserting a bunch of pieces and rotating them, and also going into Maya. Let me see. You know what? I'm just going to restart ZBrush again. We're going to clear it out again. Essentially, it's just a lot of back and forth. So while we're designing the legs, it's going into engine, and we have early blockout stuff. So it's like, okay, do these things work? Can the animators work with them? I didn't, because we were just doing so many iterations, I was getting lazy at this point and just kind of putting stuff in. So I was more concerned about the big reads, but ideally, yeah, you're worrying about the functionality. Do these legs and these pistons work together? So when you get it in game, it looks like those things working, but really it wasn't a complex process for this guy. It was literally just cubes, feet, in game. Does it animate? Put it into Maya, set my pivots, walk it, Does it look like it works? Yes. Do things interpenetrate unacceptably? No. Okay, done. It wasn't a real complex process for sure. When YouTube video, the question, what's the point of the clip brushes not deleting the excess paper thin geometry? Is there any benefit to it? Do you think there's any chance Pixelate may fix it in the future? It is fixed. You can use the trim brush, but there's a caveat. You can also use live booleans. Clipping, it is a feature. I don't know that they'll fix it, but I can show you an alternative. So for example, we have a cylinder. Grab this, and of course we can make it Polymesh 3D. We can go through here, go to your geometry crease with a crease tolerance, hit dynamic, looks nice and smooth, and then we can hit apply, and then we can just turn off blur, turn off project on your Dynamesh, and we'll just Dynamesh this down. And no, we don't want to freeze it. So we have a Dynamesh object right here, and of course you can sculpt on it. And if we want to, we can start clipping shapes out of this. You can hit X to go across X symmetry, or you can go into transform and hit Y symmetry radial count with whatever radial count you want. You can go through here and you can start clipping stuff out. You can also mask and then hold down Control Shift and we'll say like clip circle. You can go through here. You can hold down Alt. Now, if you want to, and you can use live booleans for this. You can insert mesh brush with live booleans and do all this, and array mesh. A lot of different ways you can accomplish this cleaner than this. But if you're just concepting, if you do cross that little crossover, it's going to do some wacky stuff. Usually let's hold down Alt, and then it'll kind of clip out to that. So that's another feature that you can do. You can control drag again to re-Dynamesh. You can go in like your clay brush and you can hold down Alt and just punch this in. Or you can say, let's go to my standard brush here. We'll clone it off. We'll change this to a drag dot. Throw an alpha in here. Change my focus shift -100. Just crank my Z intensity up, and then you can just go through here. Let's turn off lazy radius. You can stamp that. Oops. Focal shift to -100. There we go. You can go through here and you can stamp if you like. And then here you can go BI, brush, insert industrial parts, hit M, throw a little Phillips screw in here, move it around a little bit, and then go ahead and do split mass points. And now you've got a little complex little thing. Again, just super quick, super dirty. Now, when you go through here and you hold down Control Shift and you go to clip, and I'm going to turn off X symmetry or X radial symmetry. You can hold down Alt and you can clip through here very precisely. You can clip through here, but like if you do say clip all this, or let's do the opposite. Let's say we clip all this. It's like, okay, clip fine. And then you go here, so you get these little paper thin things and you control drag. It makes it a really gross Dynamesh. That's a feature. If you don't want it to do that, hold down Control Shift, go to trim. And then that will essentially slice through the object, fill a hole, and then you don't have those paper thin things. Now, if you want to do that manually, that would just be simply a slice curve. Isolate this one, geometry modify topology, delete hidden, close holes, and then there. That's the same operation. Now, there is some caveats to that. If you hold down Control Shift and you do clip curve and you want to do a sharp angle, it's really easy to do. Of course, you have those leftovers little things. If you go through here and you do a trim curve and you want to do a sharp angle, it's going to do this right here. So then you'd have to you can isolate this and mask it, and then you can clip this back to get what you want. It's not ideal. However, because all it's doing is, again, it's slicing through, it's isolating this, it's deleting hidden, and it's closing holes. When it does a close holes operation, it's not smart enough to go, oh, I want it to be closed here. Chi Vang has a way where you can clip through and then mirror, and you can move it over and mirror and weld to get rid of that. But what you can also do is you can go through here and hit Control W. You can slice through once, and then you can go through here with Dynamesh groups turned on. You can re-Dynamesh, and then now that will, when you run Dynamesh with groups turned on, any polygroup is Dynameshed on its own, and then it fills the hole for you. So if you isolate this one now, and you slice through, and then you bring everything back, and you say re-Dynamesh by groups, now you've got these are all separate groups. So it's like, okay, I didn't want this one. Control Shift drag, tap Control to switch back temporarily to the visibility, so you can invert that. Geometry modify topology, delete hidden, turn off groups, re-Dynamesh, and then those are going to be stuck together, and now you've got a nice clean cut through there. You can also use live booleans to do this. Kind of depends on how you want to work. For example, you can go through here and we can say it's pop a cylinder on here. really quick. Actually, we'll turn on radial symmetry again for this one if we can. I just clipped right through the middle of that one, didn't I? Okay, that's not going to help. So let's do this. Transform X symmetry. So at least we can turn off radial. So we can at least put it in the middle-ish. And then we can stick this here. Turn off X symmetry. Go to Unmesh Mesh Center. So I can move this in here. Now if I want to Boolean this out, I can... We talked about this before. We can go through here and polygroup as a Dynamesh sub and do all our operations. What I'm going to do is I'm going to previs this. So I'm going to do a split unmask points, shoot this underneath it, turn that to negative, turn on live Boolean, move this into place. And now if we turn on polyframe, you're going to see this is our preview of what we're getting with our live Boolean. Of course, you can use array mesh and masking and Dynamesh, anything you want to do. If you want to get rid of this faceting, again, we can go in here to our crease and turn on dynamic. And then we can do Shift-D to turn dynamic on and off. We'll get to that in a minute. So now we get that. And then you can either go down here to your Boolean operations and make this Boolean mesh, or you can go, you know what? I like what I see. I'm going to stay in little concepty Dynamesh mode. So I'm going to turn off live Boolean, take this one here, go to merge down. That will tag this as a Dynamesh Boolean control drag, and it'll cut it out. Now we did have that faceting in there because if we isolate this again and we do we'll do a split hidden this time. We'll put this little bent arrow to put it underneath. When you do a dynamic, it's just a preview. So we'll go ahead and apply those subdivisions and then take this one, merge it down. Oh, I forgot to make it subtractive. Isolate this one, split hidden, make it subtractive, merge it down, and oops, I did it in the wrong order. Here, you are fine, you are fine, merge down, there we go. So now that's the operation we have, and then this is just Dynamesh, so you can continue clipping, continue trimming, continue whatever you want to do. How can I reset changes in basic material to default? Restart ZBrush, or you can save basic material out and then reload it back in. So whenever if you have basic material selected and you've been doing some crazy stuff and you have a version of basic material that has been untouched, you can just hit load the basic material, it'll overwrite this one. And if you restart ZBrush without going into like document save or project save, any material changes you've made are going to be lost. So that's a feature if you want to reset all your materials. Just like when you're doing your brushes, if you want to put startup materials into ZBrush, so like if you go to ZBrushes, this goes into Lightbox. If you go to Z Startup Brush Presets, this will add brushes to your existing brush library every time you start up. And if you go into Z Data Brush Presets, and you can see there's a Brush Presets copy in here because these are the ones that actually load up with ZBrush by default. So if you change these, those change up the startup ZBrush. So be careful with these ones, but you can save over those to change the default brush settings. So shows how HDGeo works. Can you make all of it visible? That is, I don't work with HDGeo that much. Paul Gabry does. In fact, I never work with it. I have notes on it, but I'm not real ZBrush HDGeo. There's a Z Classroom. If you just Google ZBrush HDGeo, there's a Z Classroom. And then also, let's see if like Paul, did you know that HDGeo videos? Because Paul Gabry he did a really good, like, how do you use HD geometry live stream? That's not popping up here. So ZBrush, if you go to their channel playlists, find Paul Gabry's Did You Know That, and go it shouldn't be too many. Scroll through there, and he does an entire hour on HD geometry, so that'll get you caught up there. Can Dynamesh work when divided one object into two separate groups? Yes, that would just be just like we were doing, having the groups turned on. Now, on this object, if I Dynamesh with groups turned on, it's going to do some really gross stuff. So we Dynamesh here, and it's going to do some really bizarre things. If we hit Control W, and then we hold down Control Shift, and we slice this one, and we Dynamesh this with groups turned on, it'll go ahead and then now these will always be separate. So no matter what you do, if you're going through here and you're like, let me smooth this and then do this, and let me take my snake hook sphere and just do some weird snake hook stuff. It's gonna let me here. Oh, you gotta go up here. Snake hook cactus. Did I change some weird settings? Do we need Sculptris Pro turned on? There we go. I'm dumb. Let's go. ZBrush 2018, what's new? Watch it. I should probably watch it because I need to get caught up back up again. So as you're doing this, as long as you stay the same polygroup, you can just keep dynameshing, and these are still one subtool, but they have separate dynamesh pieces on. Now you do have to be careful if you have any flat surfaces in here that have a polygroup, like if you do this, and it does go through here, Control W, and then you dynamesh groups this thing, it's going to leave like a little nasty floating wafer on your object. So just be cognizant of where your groups are if you're going to use this method. Have you ever heard of Ringling? Yes, I'm a graduated class of 06. It was before they had their game development thing. So I spent my 4 years in Sarasota. Would you say the more organic the mesh is, the less likely to use ZModeler? If I find myself not using it all that much, for example, animal mechs. No, I still use ZModeler very much for organic stuff. What I'll do is I'll organically create an organic shape, and then I'll use ZRemesher to figure out how the topology needs to work, and then I'll use ZModeler and live booleans on top of that. Chi Vang, let me show you that, is really good at that type of workflow. So yeah, all this hard surface, this is all done in ZBrush, making these organic shapes and then using live booleans to create that. This was all for the beta for ZBrush 4R8. So all of this stuff here is very similar. It's a lot of ZModeler, but it's also, Dynamesh and then ZRemesher as well to arrive at stuff like this. So very organic, but also super hard surface. And you're using ZRemesher and you're using live boolean to make organic mech stuff. And it's still a lot of ZModeler work. And of course, stuff like Mesh Fusion, stuff like that. Because ZBrush does have Mesh Fusion functionality here. So if we go into our cylinder again, make Polymesh 3D, and then up here, let's say we're going to go inset flat island region, and we can do an inset here. And you know what, let's just for fun, let's go to inset polygroup all region, and then I'm going to grab QMesh polygroup all. I'm just going to pop this up, and then we'll do a crease, and then crease polygroup. We'll hit D for dynamic subdivisions. We'll say crease level of 3, smooth subdiv of 4, and then we have this object. So let's say I want to put something complicated in here. So I'm going to say I'm going to give myself a little border. So again, we'll do an inset polygroup all here, and then I'm going to go out of edit mode, hit Control N, and we're going to steal a brush. I'm going to grab this poly star here. I'm going to go into my brush, BI brush insert booleans here. I'm going to hit M, and I'm going to say I like this little shape that whoever did this. So I'm going to take this shape here. I'm going to hit W, and then as I cycle through these, it'll cycle through these shapes. I'm like, I like you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal this one. You can also, there's a Z plugin. You can say IMM extractor. You can IMM brush to subtools. It'll take all of these and extract all of those meshes to subtools. But you can also just steal this one here. So I'm going to take this piece here. Yeah, that'll work. And I'm going to go ahead and say delete hidden. So this piece here, it has a hole in the back. So I'm going to hit brush, create insert mesh, new. And I'm going to go back to my cylinder here. And as long as I don't have Dynamesh turned on, I can drag on this polygroup here. So this one right here is this polygroup. I can drag right on that, and then I can control drag again, and it'll go ahead and fuse those together. It'll figure out what edge loops need to be added, and now this is one solid piece. So now if I go through here and run another crease tolerance, I can hit D for dynamic subdivisions. It's all like this. Alternatively, if you want to flip it, you can hold down Alt when you drag it out. It'll flip it underneath. Let's do that again. Like so, control drag again. And then again, Mesh Fusion will figure out the hard stuff for you, and then you're good to go. So all of that's been modeled together for you. You can do that on curved surfaces. If you're going to do it on a curved surface, obviously, when you're insert meshing a brush, number one, you're going to need a polygroup. So however you, let's do Shift D. If you're ever working in ZBrush and it's like, whoa, my performance just tanked, do Shift D. That's going to turn off dynamic subdivision. We'll get to that in a second. You can hit Control W, and now when you drag this out, you can have it resolve that, but it's going to do that kind of thing. You can even move it further away, and it'll resolve as well. But also, if you want it to conform to your surface of your object, you're going to want to, in this one, go to Modifiers, and we're going to do a projection strength up to 100. So as I drag this out, it's going to wrap to the surface of my object there. And then also, if you go in here and you go to geometry, turn off the smooth modifier, then it will, you can go through here and then you can just like smooth these transitions out. Let's turn off Sculptris Pro. Like so. Now, if you want a nicer cut through this geometry, you can try doing stuff like, let me hover over this. Let's do spherize, polygroup border. Is that what it is? And you can kind of try and spherize into a circle, but of course it's on a curved surface, so that might not work very well. In this case here, what you can try to do also is you can slice a circle through here. You'd have to go through here and collapse and clean this up to make it optimal for sure. But in a pinch, you can also just kind of use that gross geometry and then have Mesh Fusion kind of fix it for you. So it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but you can kind of get that to work a little bit for you, and then we'll turn on dynamic and we'll run a crease polygroup. So again, it's not perfect. You'll have to do a little bit of cleanup for this type of complex operation. It'll probably work better on a sphere, honestly, but you get the idea. So anyway, Mesh Fusion functionality, dynamic subdivisions. The organic stuff would be stuff like if I want to do organic sculpting, if I have like a sphere here and I go to make Polymesh 3D and I go and I turn on X symmetry and I'm like, you can use panel loops for this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, let's do some organic mech like this shape here. And I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to slice you through here. That's cool. I'm going to isolate this one, or we can ZBrush it together. We can just say go down into ZBrush. Let's say half, keep groups, smooth groups on is fine. It's organic, depth size down to 0. We can ZBrush these shapes here, and now we have these two shapes, so I can isolate this one. We'll go ahead and split hidden, and I'll say QMesh polygroup all, and we'll just pop this up, and then we'll say, you know what, I want to run a bevel along here, so we'll bevel edge loop complete, like so, and then I'll go through here and I'll say Alt Tab, QMesh polygroup all, pull down a little tabs here. I'll run a crease, turn on dynamic, smooth subdivision level of 3, crease level of 3, smooth subdivision of 4. And then we got some organic hard surface going, and then we can go back and we can turn our other thing on. And then this one we can, Z modeler and smooth and add panels or do panel loops if we want to, go through here and then say geometry, edge loop. Let's do some panel loops, crank up that thickness. Oh, there's also panel loop presets, so you can go into Z plugins, just download those and install them. We've gone over that before. Earlier in the live stream yesterday, I believe. And then we can go down here to, do I not have it? Panel loop presets. So for example, we can take a cube, Polymesh 30, hit Control D, just to give us a little bit more resolution to work with. And I'm just going to go here. We'll delete lower. So on this one, we can go through and we can slice panels through here, and we go, hey, I want a preset. I like this one. So you can select it, say accept, and now you have this kind of cut. Control Shift A, and now you've got a little box here. Ta-da! And then on top of this, this is where you can do your live Boolean. So if we go to subtool here, let's actually go brush insert mesh Boolean, hit M. It's like I want to put this little agreeable detail on it in X symmetry. So we'll go through here with our X symmetry turned on, and then I'm going to go to, again, split unmasked point, shoots it below, turn on subtractive, turn on live Boolean, and now it's cutting all the way through because it's a thin mesh. That's okay. So you can go through here, and if we want to thicken this mesh up, it's pretty easy with panel loops. So we can go through here. I'm going to say Control Shift A, split hidden, turn on polyframe here. Let's go into solo mode, and you can just inflate along the surface normals, QMesh polygroup all, and you can just hold down Shift as your start QMeshing. Let's turn off live Boolean here. Hold on. There we go. Start QMeshing and hold down Shift. Seems to be, it might be too many polygons for this thing. Did I do polygroup all or all polygons here? Polygroup all. Let's do this. I'm going to isolate this, mask it, invert it, and we're going to do an inflate. So we can inflate along there, so we can thicken that up. And then in here, I'm going to isolate this, and we'll deflate it. Actually, are my normals flipped? No, I'm fine. So now if I turn off solo, we turn on transparency mode, we turn on live Boolean. So now we can Boolean out these shapes here. Gives that a little bit of thickness to that shell here. And even these we can swap on the fly. So we're going to brush insert. Let's hit Q first. BI brush insert. Booleans, like I don't really like those. So again, hit W and just cycle through all these shapes and figure out which one you like. Maybe we want to go back and punch this little shape in. So we know you can punch this in here. And again, on this one, you can hit D for dynamic subdivisions, make it a little smoother. So very quickly, you can go through and Boolean that up. We just made sub D preview a little faster. It's painfully so when you have a lot going on in your subtool. Yeah, if it's a very complex one, yeah, it can be a little bit chuggy. But you know, when I'm generally when I'm using it, let me see if I have that loaded up. Let's try this. Preferences, initialize. Oh, you know what? That's why I don't like it. Let me just restart ZBrush. I do keep my shapes fairly simple. Could you tell what polygroup it's good for? Yeah, I'm not going to go into super detail on that, but it is good for just creating quick masks based on your poly paint. It's not a whole lot different than poly painting and masking by intensity. It's also good for being able to fill stuff. If you want a lot of more in-depth in that, it's the ZBrush 8 2018 What's New has polygrouped in it. Jonas says, I use Sculptors Pro Smooth for clip brush planes. Yeah, that'll work too. Yeah, exactly. You can use Sculptors Pro and it'll kind of eat away at your geometry. Good point. Very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Cool. Realistic size in ZBrush I'm not going to cover. I wouldn't do it in ZBrush, but feel free to. I mean, in here, if I load up my streaming Earthworm Jim, it's not realistic eyes, but it's about as realistic as I ever get. You can see in here, if we alt tap this eyeball here, you can see it's made up of an outer glossy shell with a little bump on it, and then inside of that is the pupil, and inside of that, boy, this is unorganized as hell. It's got the iris, and then it's got the eyeball. So let's hold down Shift, turn these off, and I'm just going to turn on the eyeball layers here. So here's all the eyeball pieces, and then on top of that goes this little glossy thing. So when I go into Keyshot, if you want to see the making of this guy, go to my YouTube channel. Actually, go to my ArtStation page. ZBrush 2018 Speed Sculpts. So here, yeah, here's the Earthworm Jim. You can see his eyeballs being rendered, and then here's how I made him, just a little time lapse here. So I can show you how I made these eyeballs, and this is kind of ZModeler stuff. It's hard surface stuff, so we can go in here and we can say Sphere 3D. I'm going to simplify this a little bit. Initialize, we're going to say maybe 24, 24, and then make Polymesh 3D. So I'm going to duplicate off a copy of this thing because I'm probably going to need it again. I'm going to go to solo mode. And then for here, what I can do is I can hold down Control Shift, and I can say delete those things. We'll delete hidden. Now when you go in here to ZModeler and you go to hover over an edge, go to close convex hole, you can pull out. Oh, you know what? Yeah, it should still work. Interactive resolution, interactive curvature. Sometimes it has problems on things that are too high res. Is it 24? I thought 24 would be okay. Let's try 16. Make Polymesh 3D. Isolate that. Delete hidden. Okay, so yeah, now you can get that interactive curvature. So I can go through here and create the lens like this. You can isolate this one, Control Polygroup, and then you can do like crease PG and then hit D for dynamic. And all that is, I should probably talk about this now. Geometry, dynamic subdivisions, dynamic turned on, dynamic turned off. You can hit D and then Shift D to turn that on and off. There's also Q grid stuff in here we'll get to when we get to the drone. But now we got that little lens here. Now if I want to invert this lens, how do I do that? Because if I go through here and I close holes and I pull out for interactive elevation, it's only going to go out. So I've got to go down here to display properties. I can hit flip to flip my normals, and now when I pull in, it'll invert that, and then I can go through here and I can flip them back, and then now it goes inwards. So now I have this little concave little disc here, and now if I want to make a pupil off of this, I can just hold down Alt, and I can tag these ones here, and then I can say QMesh, polygroup all, and then I can hold down Control and just pull out a copy, and then make a pupil here. Or probably what I would do is just say duplicate this off, Alt tag these ones, just Alt marking them, isolate, select, Control Shift, isolate, and then just run like a QMesh on these things. And then again, we'll run a crease PG, and they'll say dynamic crease level of say 3, smooth set of 4, and then now we've got this thing here, and then again, there we go. So now we've got a little eyeball in here, and then on top of that, you could do the lens version. Oh boy, where'd I end up? If I miss anything, I apologize in advance. When you make the cinematics, you import the environment into Maya to animate the character. Oh boy. I'm not. I would imagine if it does need to interact, you can bring in a proxy for sure, and then just kind of walk the animation through. Dan Rubel would be the man to ask about that. I'm not exactly sure how he did it. I wish I had a better answer for you, but yeah, I would assume that if it has to interact with the environment, for sure, you would have the environment with the model so that they could go through and make decisions on how it goes around. Would you feel it's better to add small greebles in the normal map rather than the model, at least for games and films? For films, I'm not sure, but for games, absolutely. Anything that doesn't break the silhouette and need to be modeled into the model, it's just less destructive put in the texture. If you're just going to start a ZBrush, you have a playlist of video I recommend. You can go to my YouTube channel. I have 50 videos I'm going to post. I need to make thumbnails for them and put them on the internet. It's going to be a new updated quick start guide for ZBrush to get you started. In the meantime, you can go to Intro to ZBrush Part 1. It's a little dated, but it'll still walk you through. It's like 56 videos or something. Let me link you here. Go to Intro to ZBrush Part 1, and that'll do it. There might be some other videos out there for people, but those are the ones I have. ZBrush understand vector files like spline. You can, yes, with a caveat. So if you go to my playlist and you go to, and this is good for like mech creation too, if you have vector stuff you want to convert. If you go to ZBrush 4R8, what's new? There is the text tool somewhere in here. I can just show you real quick. So let's grab switch. Let's go to Polymesh 3D, and let's go to, I always like having my brush menu open for some reason. So what we really need is my Z plugin menu. And in here, you're going to have text 3D and vector shapes. So if we go through here, you can import a new SVG. Do I have an SVG in here anywhere? For my ZBrush 4R8. Oof. I don't. In there, I do. I go to I bring in like a YouTube SVG, but you can bring in an SVG through here, and essentially what it'll do is something like this, and it'll import it into geometry. Now, with this geometry here, with text here, you can go through here and you can make your own text. I believe you can even load your font file in here if you have a special one, and you can say, I want to extrude it more, I want to change spacing, I want to add a bevel here, and then the bevel resolution you can crank up, and after you add resolution, you can say, I want it to be either curve inwards or bubbled outwards, and you can do that. So you can create texts and do cool stuff with that. Let me see what this brings up here. Okay. So this is what Video Nomad was trying to post. I need to unlock you with my Nightbot. Yeah. So here's the part 1. Thank you for that video. Yes. Cool. Cool. Thanks, John, for the kind words. Glad the videos worked out. Is there a way to send your creatures of Maya to ZBrush without Go Z? Ooh, FBX might send it over. If you do Z plugin FBX export, it might retain that information. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Cool. Awesome. And again, if I miss anything, is there any way to export FBX in Substance Painter? I think Substance Painter, we tried it yesterday, it exported OBJs. But maybe that would be something they could implement. Where to get the panel loop presets from? Gumroad links. Oh, yeah. Let me show you that. So go to ZBrush plugins, download center, and then down here, way down here. So up here is the new stuff. So this was the Z color we talked about. Metal quotes intersection masker is all brand new. But way down here under the employee created, there is panel loops presets. So you can download that and install it, which we talked about. Cool. Oh yeah, Z plugins exports SPX Substance. Yeah, if that's what you were talking about. But yeah, if it's in Painter and you want to export your Painter FBX that you've imported out of Painter, I only saw an OBJ option, but I could be wrong. But yeah, okay, cool. So let's keep on keeping on. Refining characters here. So Tony Reynolds did our base face sculpts and our base hair, which we'll get to in a second, and set up our shaders in Unreal and did the texture work. Like I said before, this might be a little bit weird, but you can, well, I'm just going to touch on this. There's a lot better people at this than me, Tony Reynolds being one of them. But when it comes to like super high resolution portraiture and all that stuff, like I'm not gonna sit here and show you guys how to do that when there was like 10 presenters at ZBrush who did that. So I'm going to say, I'll give you a real quick overview. Where's my old man? So this was something we were demoing a while ago. So all this skin, excuse me, give me a second. Sorry about that. All this skin that was painted on him was, ooh, do I still have that? Let's go to texture, import, desktop, polypaint head. Yeah, so you can bring in texture images. You can load in like this one here, and then go to texture, select it, add the spotlight. And with also the new ZBrush that they were showing some new features on Friday. If you go to their channel, they now have under the draw menu, you'll have actual camera settings. So you can match your focal length in ZBrush to whatever was in your camera. So you can go through here, you can rotate this, you can scale it, you can even warp it and liquefy it if you want to, but when you hit Z, let's go ahead and dumb that down a little bit. I'm going to drop that opacity down a little bit. You can go through here and you can match up your model. And again, use your draw menu and go through here and change the angle of view to kind of match, whatever. Match whatever your camera view was. And then you can, go into standard brush, turn on RGB. It's up to 100. And now you can simply just paint your skin through. And if you have X symmetry turned on, it will paint symmetrically on your object there. So let's go through and paint skin right onto your model. And then, yeah, if this thing does have UVs, you can go down here to texture, map. You can say create, new from polypaint, and then it'll go ahead and throw your polypaint right into a texture map. You can export that. Also under Z plugin, there's the multi-map exporter. You can bake your polypaint, your cavity, your normals, your AO, using this and export it. So, yes. And then, yeah, Substance Painter is what I'll use for texturing 99% of the time. What software do you use to cut out the chrome in my live stream? So in OBS, ooh, this is probably going to look weird. So in here, essentially, I go to have my camera turned on. So I use OBS to do that. If you right-click it and you go to Filters, you can set a chroma key, and then in here I have a green screen behind me, so I have key color set to green, and I can actually change this here. So you can say, hey, here's my green screen, and then I can go through here and change the chroma settings. And now I do have a camera, Logitech something or other, and actually let's see if I close that. It is a C922 Pro Stream webcam. This thing actually has built-in, you don't even need a green screen, it'll actually dynamically cut you out. It's hit or miss for me, so I kind of like watching myself. So you can use that setting in the camera to do it for you without a green screen, but your mileage may vary. And yeah, you can go through here. You can actually use texture XYZ to do the exact same thing. Texture, import, go through here. You can load in displacement maps in here if you have skin with that match up to your UVs, and you can turn on displacement, put it on a layer. You can go through here and you can use spotlight with Z-add turned on to paint pores through texture XYZ as well. And let's turn texture off here. You can also, there's so many things. I mean, there's tons of resources on this. Again, I'm not going to belabor this point, but you can go through here and you can like Z-add, Z intensity down. You can like spray pore detail here. So you can make it really small. You can go through here and you can hold down Alt and you can like spray pores. In fact, let's go to brush. Let's go to alpha, sorry. Modify. We'll turn on H tiles and V tiles maybe. Maybe that'll help. Yeah, so when I go through here, you can like spray on pore detail and have like little wrinkle brushes. So you can go through here, you can stamp. Alpha, let's drop these back down. You can stamp wrinkle details. So if you bring in an alpha, let's go ahead and clone our standard bird off, drag rect. You can stamp alphas like this, or again, you can spray these things and you can kind of get like leathery wrinkle detail. You can set it up so that it follows the path, and a lot of different things you can do. You can even bring in your own alphas here. Let's see if we have any alphas that are worthwhile. There you go. Leathery skin should be one that you have by default. So if you change this is going to spray that leathery skin on there. You can also do a drag rect, that leathery skin. In my creature series, we do some of this type of work on my, that one is just my Gumroad page and my ZBrush page, so that's a whole big long creature series where we sculpted that full body of that reptile. But that's how you do that kind of stuff. Now, we'll get to the hair later. Blend shapes, demo this real quick. Streaming, Summit, Demos, Blend Shapes, Recon Blend Shapes. So, usually when you're doing blend shapes, you don't have the fingers included, but again, we are running fast and furious. I didn't want to mess anything up, so I just did it with whatever her skin geometry had, so it has her fingers, so generally you probably won't have that. It'll probably just be her head and maybe a little cut down here. But, let's turn off her eyelashes. So we've got her eye occluder in here. This is just basically her eye geometry, just for reference. So while I'm making her eyelid close, I can do that. If I choose her and go down here to layers, you're going to see we have layers turned on in here. Let me go down. We have like, I can do a jaw jut. You can go forward and backward. You can even overcrank these down here. Go way forward, way back. But generally speaking, these are linear interpolations. So if you're doing like arm movements, you know, it's just going to linearly interpolate vertice point A, point 1 to point 2 linearly. It's just going to move those vertices from this straight to that one. There's no concept of like rotational values. So that's where joints come in. So it can sometimes be kind of limiting, but you can use this to like do corrective blend shapes, or just do like, you know, you can do like here's a cheek puff. So you can do cheek puff and then mix that with a little bit of a lips blow, because when she's blowing on the cartridge it goes. So you can kind of mix these in. You can even add a little snarl in there if you want to. Snarl left, snarl right, and lower lid up, lower lid right up, like. And then we can even put a little jaw jet in there, or we can do jaw down. Now again, it's linear interpolation, so it's not really rotating, but it'll just kind of move those vertices down a little bit. It's kind of gross looking, but that's how we did her blend shapes. So that's the overview. Let's go back to our McGee head here. And in my CGMA class and some videos I'm going to put out later, we go through this process step by step. But if I drop this down to subdivision level 1, we can add blend shapes to this. So we're on subdivision level 1. We have layers. You can just add a layer. It requires you to be on the highest. So go to the highest, add a layer, drop it down. It's going to be grayed out, but it's still going to be recording. So we can go through here, and I'm going to turn back symmetry. We'll do like an eyebrow up, and then we'll go back up to our highest. We'll tap off, and now we have an eyebrow up layer. And you can just you can have it up, and you can just turn it off, and it'll turn it off for you. Instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is say just delete that layer. And just so I don't have to keep going back and forth, I'm just going to go down to subdivision level 1. Generally, when you're doing blend shapes, having a high res is fine, but usually you're going to be working with your base mesh that has your UVs and it's all perfect. So what you can do is you can say delete higher, and we're just working with our base mesh here. So now at this point, we can go add a layer. We can make whatever changes we want. We can tap off, then our layer becomes like this. If it's like, oh, you know what, it's not perfect. In fact, I only wanted to really deform it this much, or I wanted to deform it a little bit more. You know, it's kind of up to you, but it's like, okay, I don't want to deform it that much. You can turn record back on, and you can make changes to it however you want. You can smooth it out if you want to, and be like, okay, that's what I really wanted. Tap off again, and now it's updated. So let's go up here, and you know what? I'm just going to go do a color fill object. So that's how you can do that. Now, if you want to use, let's turn this off and let's go and delete it. The plugin, which I suggest you do, go here to ZPlugin. Oh, you know what? I don't even need to go over this. I'm dumb. It's called ZBrush for what's new? No. Go to my YouTube channel. This one's just kind of floating. Go to my videos, do a search for ZBrush Maya Blend Shapes plugin. That'll tell you exactly how to do it. I'm not going to waste my time. There you go. Have fun. Next. So here's all the refined shapes. Here's all the pieces. Now all of these pieces, there's a ton of ZModeler going on in here. So if I load these up, let's say we go to streaming, summit, characters. For example, her little back radio view details. So I always have a null thing here for the naming, but here is my back radio here. We turn on polyframe. Let's make this a little bit brighter. Let's go to matcap gray. Let's see if I can change the intensity a little bit. Okay, so here's the back radio. If I go into, I've rearranged some of these, so it's going to be a little bit broken. Let's fix it. So I'm going to take this one here. I'm going to hold down Shift, shoot it to the bottom, and then now it's going to cut in. Now there is a mesh in there that I need, so I'm going to turn off this. I'm going to turn off this. I'm going to turn off this one. There we go. This is the one I need. So I'm going to move this out a little bit here, and then I'm going to turn everything back on. And this one I'm going to shoot all the way down to the bottom here. Sorry, this is slightly unorganized file. I'm going to turn this back on, turn this off. So now this little nameplate, this little plate right here will fit into this little notch here. Something like this. There we go. So here's a little back radio here. And you're going to see most of it, if not all of it. Let's go ahead and do our handy dandy merge visible so we can see the whole thing. Here's essentially what it is. It's super lightweight. I think I cheated a little bit over here to get these shapes, but you could do ZModeler with this stuff with Insert Mesh, Mesh Fusion like we showed you. Let's tap here. There we go. So yeah, all of this stuff all in here is ZModeler, and then dynamic subdivision. If I hit D, here it is dynamic. Here it is not dynamic. So again, this is a fairly complex object, but I don't usually have it all put together. It's all 39 pieces here, and then when I turn off live booleans, you're going to see this is where it cuts in. These things are supposed to cut in. Let's move those down. There we go. So yeah, and these things can cut in. These looks like these were knocked off axis a little bit, but yeah, these things are cut in here. So if I alt tap this one here, we go into solo mode. This is an insert mesh brush that I made that just has like the little flip switches and little things. You can stick them in there. I even have one that has a cover. Do I have that one? Let's see, brush. Oh yeah, I think I do. And then we'll go to bolts, knob, switches. It's a big one. M. And then I've got like, ooh, if I want like a little flipper switch, what style do I want it in? Oh, I want the little one with the little thumb switch. So then I can go through here. And if I had made these nano mesh, I could actually just replace them. But since I didn't, I use an insert mesh brush, I got to do it manually. So I can just go through here. I'm going to do like a split unmasked points to shoot it down here. And then, you know, at this one, let's say we want to swap this one out. Let's go ahead and delete that one. Delete hidden, geometry modified topology, delete hidden. And we're going to put in this one here. So we're going to stick this here and then stick it in. We'll go ahead and do a turn on our trusty live boolean, cut in here, and then I'm going to shoot this one to the bottom here. There you go. So we can swap those little switches out, and then you know what? This one probably needs to be rotated. There you go. So however you want to do that, and if you want to flip this switch, what you can do is we can say I want this stuff. Actually, yeah, I guess it is. All this stuff, so I'm going to mask it out. Hit W, I'm going to hold down Alt and reset this pivot. In fact, if we want to really reset the pivot where it should be, I'm going to, I think, let's grab these three here, hit W, and hold down Alt and just tap on that vertice right there, mask, invert that, and then now when I rotate this, that whole thing will rotate so I can match those up. There we go, little radio. And all of this stuff here, the butt pack we can check out if y'all want. If y'all want to. Same deal. This one has a little bit of cloth. This is just sculpted cloth. I don't think I bothered using Marvelous Designer. Computer radio, these are kind of boring. The shoulder cannon is kind of cool. So it's again a lot of ZModeler, live Boolean stuff. So if I turn off, so here you can see all these shapes right here. When I turn on live Boolean, that's what's getting me that nice, you know, this is all ZModeler in. And then when I turn this on, it goes and slices through, and it does that kind of shape here. So this little shoulder mount, and there's where the bullets come out. And back here, hold on, let me turn this on. Turn off, yeah. So all this stuff gets cut in, and then little bolts and stuff get thrown in there. But a lot of it is ZModeler. You know, like this thing here is just super basic, simple shapes. Nothing fancy. Like so. And then the mount for this thing. Mount resize. Did I already open that up? I think I did. Same deal. This is mostly ZModeler, I think. Yeah. So let's see. Turn that off. Oh, yeah, I guess I do have some live Boolean here. So instead of figuring out how to get this shape right here to be curved and then flattened off and then getting this to resolve with little loops and stuff like that, all I did was just take a live Boolean and just go and just slice it right through. It's not ideal necessarily if you are going to cut that in, and you maybe have to retopologize it a little bit. But it was good enough for me. But yeah, most of this here, we do a merge visible. This is all just ZModeler, a little bit of live Boolean. We can hit D for our dynamic subdivisions, and then you can see, pretty simple. Cool. Have any streams or videos on doing skin and substance? Kind of. If you go to my YouTube channel, it's kind of just an overview. But on the Commander playlists, under Commander, I'll link you to this playlist here. There's a skin and rendering. So in here I kind of walk through how I set up the skin in Substance Painter. And then you can render subsurface scattering in Substance Painter with the subsurface scattering. You can do translucency. You can also set it up in iRay. I didn't set it up in this case, but as long as you have no, I think the reason I didn't is it possibly wasn't a closed mesh. In iRay, to do SSS, you have to have a closed mesh. But yeah, that'll kind of walk you through my skin process. And then all this other stuff too, like metal and paint and doing the spray on little gross splattery paint and stuff like that, and cloth and dirt and stuff like that. That'll kind of walk you through that. And in Emmet it says you can also use Noisemaker for skin. That's also true. So I'm going to go ahead and let's dump all that memory out of ZBrush here. So when you go, and there's all the pieces we were demoing. When you are using Noisemaker, you can go through and you can add noise. I'll show you that in just a second. So you know what? Let's say, no, I guess we'll use a head here. Go to surface, noise. We talked a little bit about this yesterday when we were or maybe the day before. We were doing, let's try that noise strength here. So you can go through here and you can change this curve to kind of give you, you know, whatever effect you're looking for, and you can also change the scale here. You can also bring in your own alphas and tile in your own tiling skin alpha, and you can also, oh boy, what else can you do? You can also go in here to noise plug, and you can change these settings to see if you can get something that's worthwhile for you. But if this is what you like, you know, okay, it hasn't been applied to my object yet. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, if we do go down here and we say apply to mesh, it's going to be low res. So you got to make sure you have enough resolution to support it. You can mask by noise. So if you have this and then you do like an inflate or a deflate, you can just deflate and inflate through that mask if you don't want to just apply it. But if you do want to just apply it, you say, I'm going to make a new layer, make a morph target, store it, and then when we say apply to mesh, the noise disappears because again, it's just a displacement preview. And now we can go through here and we can knock this down. We can increase it so we can kind of dial in exactly what we want. If you want to under crank it, you can. If you want to over crank it, you can. Kind of depends on what you're looking for. But say, okay, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. I'm going to bake all. You can also have a little more control with morph target. So you can go BMO, and you can go to Z intensity 100, turn RGB off, and you can morph it out where you don't want it. Or you can hit switch, and you can morph it in where you do want it. So you can use that as well. Thanks for bringing it up. You make a shader that projects a sharp color from left to right so you can see a split line and undercut, so you can use it for multiple undercut analysis. Maybe, yeah, that might be cool, like a little previs. I don't see why you couldn't do that. I don't know that I could demo it right now, but absolutely go through that matte cap maker, and I bet you could set up a matte cap, maybe even just like a gradient. Let's switch this out. Let me see, material. So we swap this out. Let's get if we just did have a light to dark. I wonder, yeah, because you could set up like a black to a white and then play with that gradient. Yeah, I don't know that I have a real elegant answer for you right off the bat, but it seems like that would be a good thing. You could do that. I made one where I did the reflection channel on the map, but I can't rotate it since it doesn't rotate with the object. Yeah, so in here, if you make it at a matte cap and you use this image to bake that lighting material into your object, you can go in here to, I think, orientation. Let's grab something obvious here. The droplet here, if you change orientation of A, you can go in here and rotate it. So if you have it set up, you will be able to rotate using the orientation to kind of rotate that texture through. Jonah says, I'm pretty interested in what you said about organic maximum Z modeler. Would you still block out the general volumes and silhouette using Dynamesh, though? For sure. If whatever's faster and easier for you, I would say do that. If it's just your big ideas, use whatever's fastest for you. If you're fast in Z modeler and you know where you're going, use Z modeler. If you're not sure, then use Dynamesh and Clip and alpha stamping to get your idea out, and then you can decide, do I just bake my Dynamesh? Because that's perfectly valid. There's no reason to rebuild everything if you don't need to, if it's just going to be baked in game and be something insignificant. But if you do want to rebuild it, you can go manual retopology and crease and subdivide, or ZRemesh, or a mix of the two. Would you say remove some freedom in your design when you go into ZRemesh too early? Maybe, but you can always ZRemesh again. It's pretty fast. So if you ever feel the need to be like, you know what, I don't want to feel like I'm locked in anymore, Dynamesh it, Sculptures Pro, do whatever you want, and then ZRemesh again. And the Venom trailer, the human converted into Venom are blend shapes. That I have no idea. Those guys are way more advanced than I am. How do you make a ray tool so any radial components are drawn out from the center? You know what? I think. Hold on a second. How can I center the array mesh pivot to the world axis? Is probably the best I can do for you. I'll link you to that. Blend shapes used in animation in films and games, for sure. You can use blend shapes for films for sure. In fact, Double Negative showed their blend shapes on their kaiju for their creatures at the summit. I managed to catch it. I haven't watched all of them yet, but that's when I remember. I think there's actually a couple that showed off the blend shapes. And then for games, you can either use blend shapes in video games. You can also convert that blend shape information to joint information, depending on how your engine's set up and how you like to run things or optimization purposes. Pick one or the other, but not a dumb question. Yeah. As far as like how long it took to make like these things here, these things are like just a couple hours. This thing right here probably took me a day. This thing right here probably took me 2 days or maybe even 3 days. Because it's, if it's from a concept, sometimes concepts help. And it's like, oh, I know exactly where to put the stuff and it goes really quick. Sometimes concepts are very complex but difficult to interpret. So that can actually add time. Sometimes modeling it yourself or just designing it yourself is faster because everything clicks together and you can just design and you're not worried about a concept and matching it. Sometimes designing it takes longer because you're just figuring stuff out and you're working through things, and the design process can really bloat your time if you're having to do a lot of exploration. So sometimes designing yourself is fast, sometimes it's really slow. Sometimes using a concept is really fast, sometimes it's a little bit slower or difficult. Excuse me. So, kind of depends on what you're doing. So, down here, we're getting into local symmetry and world symmetry, and all that is for example, if we load up, let's do cheap one here. So let's say we're going to look at this one. Oh, hush. And then go in edit mode. I'm going to do a quick subtool, merge, visible. So, for example, while I'm working, oh my God, enough with the morph brush. So while I'm working on stuff down the center of ZBrush here, so if I turn my floor, there's my ZBrush center, that's my world center. So any of this stuff here, Control Shift, and we're going to split this off. I can hit X, and we go into X symmetry, and it works. So let's say I go to Brush, Insert. No, let's do this. Brush, Insert, Model Kit, and we'll hit M. You can go through here and you can scroll through here. I also like to hit M and just kind of quickly grab what I need. So let's go ahead and grab this shape here. You can go ahead and insert these shapes. Now let's say, you can drag these straight out at you. There's a couple different ways. Picker is one way to do it. You can go to orientation, and this thing is actually an arrow. So if you point it downwards, they're always going to be pointing downwards. You can also go through here. You can say, just click on this, and then it'll just always be pointed straight out no matter what the underlying surface is. So if you want to do that, you can do that. So let's go ahead and say split on mesh points. And now we're working on this model. And let's just show these two here. So now we're working on this model here. So if I hit X, the X symmetry is already inherited because we inserted it on this one. X symmetry is turned on, so now X symmetry is turned on for here. So of course I can go through here and I can say, let's go polygroup, polyloop, and we'll go to inset polygroup all, and we'll do region through here, and then we'll do like a Q mesh polygroup all, and we can hold down shift and push this in. Then we can do like crease PG and hit D, and then that turns on dynamic. And there we go. So now we're modeling across X symmetry, right? Now if I want to scale these up, you're going to see it's going to scale way out and it's going to scale way in. It's doing world axis scaling. So what you need to do is go over here to LSim, and now you can scale right along your local symmetry axis. Now, if we have this object here, and we go to insert, say, a simple cube, and we have our picker on, and we have our cube over here, and we go ahead and say, it's actually going to be a pain in my butt, isn't it? Okay, so we do that. We go ahead and say split unmasked points. So we're kind of working on this cube here. And then here, if we do a mirror and weld, it's just going to mirror and weld across an axis. However, if we go through here, let's do this. Let's do insert single edge loop here, and then we'll go ahead and say bevel this edge loop complete, and then I'll hold down Control Alt, and then go to Unmesh Mesh Center, and we'll scale it along here. So this is the shape we have here. Again, if we do mirror and weld, because it's across an axis, it will mirror and weld across that axis. However, if we turn off X symmetry, hold down Control Shift, hold down Alt, and then Geometry Modify Delete Hidden, now I just have this object on one side. So when I turn on X symmetry and I have local sim turned off, it's going to be like, oh, I'm X symmetrical with nothing. There's nothing over here. So if I want to do this, if I do mirror and weld, it's going to be like, doesn't result in any polygons, because if I turn on my floor, the mirror and weld operation does negative X to positive X. So what I got to do first is deformation, mirror across the X axis, mirror and weld, and then it mirrors across the world axis, and then now here I am in symmetry again, so I can hold down Control Alt and I can just move these things in symmetry. However, if I just want this thing on one side, turn off X, delete that, so let's go ahead and delete hidden. So it's like this. Now it's like, well, I want this thing to be mirrored. I want it to be like mirrored across this x-axis. So if I do a mirror and weld, or a mirror, let's say I have it on this side. Let's say I do a mirror and weld here, it's going to just throw it over here. So if I turn on LSim and I do a mirror and weld, that's going to mirror it on its local axis this way. So that way you can actually, and if I, so that's mirroring and welding. Now it's still not symmetrical. I don't have symmetry turned on. I haven't hit X, so activate symmetry is off. So I go down Mesh Center, hold down Control, and put out an edge loop, and hold down Control, put out another edge loop, so I can keep doing that. If I do another mirror and weld, it's going to mirror this side to that side, and it's taking the entire bounding box. So this vertice to this vertice, it creates a box, and then it puts a center line right down the middle of that box that makes your axis mirrorable. So what I can do is I can, if I want to say keep this and mirror it, I can go mirror and X, I can do a mirror and weld, and then mirror it back, and then now it's symmetrical across this local axis here. If I hit X to turn on X symmetry, it is now mirrored in X symmetry locally on this axis right here. So now I can go through here and I can say inset a single poly, each poly, I can inset this. Now when you inset, if you hold down Control, it'll do a proportional inset. If you don't, it'll just do this. If you hold down Shift, it'll do a square inset. So Shift is square, default is just, I don't even know what that is, and then Control is proportional inset. So Control proportional inset, and then yeah, Q mesh your ball. We can push this in. You can see we're symmetrical across this local axis. This is world, this is local. Now, local symmetry can sometimes mess you up, so just be aware that it's on, but when you're working in local axis on a complex object, you can have symmetry here. It doesn't have to be X symmetry either. If we go into mirror and weld, it's geometry modify topology mirror and weld, we say do it in the Z. You can mirror and weld in the Z axis. Again, it just took your bounding box, put a mirror and weld line right down the middle, so we can, move this forward, we can change the bounding box, and it doesn't really matter because whenever we mirror and weld, we can do X, Y, and Z. Let's turn off our floor, mirror and weld X, Y, and Z. There we go. So we can mirror and weld in X, Y, and Z. We can also go into transform and turn on X, Y, and Z symmetry. So we have X, Y, and Z symmetry with local symmetry turned on. And now when I tap Alt, it'll grab all 4 sides of this thing. So let's go ahead and do a quick bevel edge loop complete. And now when I tap Alt, we're getting all 4 corners of this. So now we'll do like another inset here. Hold down Control, and then Q mesh, probably your ball. That shift. So again, symmetry however you'd like locally on this off axis, so that you can work in world symmetry and then also local symmetry on objects like this and like this. all together. Now, if you have something like the commander, where his gun is like off to the side here for the final model, I'll have a working file where I can work across world symmetry, local symmetry, and then I'll have a proxy in here that just turns it, because there's no arbitrary working plane like in Modo. So it's a little bit easier to work on a separate file in that case. How to optimize this mesh for game. That goes into production stuff, which, boy, that's a whole other mess. We'll get to that eventually sometime. Yes, you'd have to retopol. If you want to do it right, you would retopologize hard surface objects. However, if you're working smart and you're using, essentially, if you want to make a game res, I mean, this thing's essentially almost a game res as is. But if you're working and you know you're going to want to cut something into the game res like this right here, you could use live Boolean. Let's go ahead and do Control-Shift-A. We'll go ahead and split this off. So, for example, let's go ahead and say it's dynamic, crease level of 3, smooth of 4. So let's say this is your high res here, but you would want to cut in these holes and this line and all this stuff up here. If you wanted to have this show up in your game res, then I would just build it in. So this right here is nearly ready to go game res. You can collapse some edges, you can optimize this a little bit, but a lot of your work's already done. You know, like this stuff here, you can just go through and edge, insert single edge loop, hold down Alt, and get rid of like any extraneous loops. You can go through here and you can like collapse these. So we can like maybe try a collapse poly loop and just collapse these in to get rid of those extraneous poly loops there. So you can be like, let's optimize this a little bit. This one's not going to work because it's got a cut right. Oh yeah, it should. There we go. There you go. So you can go through and optimize this a bit. However, I think maybe even here, you know, I built those in so it's smooth correctly, but, you know, if you're just doing a game res, you don't really need those, then feel free to optimize however you'd like. But this is all built in. If I had used live Booleans to cut this in, then yeah, I would have to be like, well, how am I gonna, you can decimate it down, that's fine for hard surface stuff sometimes, but, you know, just work smart, and like, if you had little greeble detail, like if I hit D, and on here, and you know, this isn't gonna smooth correctly because I got rid of my control loops there. Let's go ahead and put those back in so I don't feel bad about it. So now that we have this, if we go in here to like say BI brush insert Boolean, and we grab, okay, I want greeble detail. So I'm going to go through here, and this is all just going to be information in the texture. Now, you can also work smart here. You don't have to put it in ZBrush. You can just stamp the stuff later on non-destructively in your texture. That's fine. But for example, let's say we want to do like an array of these things. So we'll turn on array mesh, transpose lock size, hit W. I'm going to hit Y so I can use a transpose line, and I'm going to drag out, hold down shift and drag these out. I'm going to go into repeat and just crank my repeats up using transpose here. And then I can scale these down if I want to, or I can just move them in like so I can kind of space these out. And again, if we're using live Boolean here, we can go through here, we can make these subtractive, and so now we're stamping that detail in. What I would do is I would process this for a high res, so I'm going to go here to geometry, not geometry, subtool, Boolean, dynamic subdiv, make Boolean mesh. So when I'm processing these, you can also, under Z plugin, go here to live Boolean masters. Gives you a little bit more control as to how it does its live Booleans and how it treats the start groups. Also, the new folder system that ZBrush showed on Friday. Oh, it's already 8 o'clock. Okay, that's the last thing I'm going to show. So I got to work out. I'm trying to get back into my routine since I didn't work out for like 3 months straight. So if you are going to bake this out, you can throw the, this is your UMesh. So now this is going to be your high res that you bake to. But for your game res, if this is just live Boolean, just turn it off. Like you are gone. And then hit Shift D, and then there's your game res. Clean it up a little bit, but yeah, you don't use live Booleans when it's smart. You build in and ZModeler when it's smart to save you time later on. Now you don't have to. You can use Dynamesh. You can be creative. You can just do whatever you want, and then later retopologize everything, or decimate it down and bake it. All of that stuff we covered. I want to say last time, somewhere in here, YouTube playlist here. And also, I go through that process in the Sci-Fi Weapon Pistol series. I decimate down and then put that into Painter. In this speed modeling and texturing, I do ZBrush, decimate it down, throw it into Painter. A lot of different things in my live streams here, full episodes. This little Bible thing right here, we went through Houdini. The Houdini game dev toolset will automatically make you a game res, UV it for you, bake your maps if you want, throw that into Painter if you want. So I've done it quite a few times. So I'm going to go to my streaming notes here, and we're going to wrap this up. So any other questions I'll throw on the next. You're creating these hard surface props. Are you doing conceptual designs first to get shapes and proportions? Are you free forming? Yeah, both. Insert mesh brushes, Dynamesh, ZModeler, use anything at your any tools you have in your tool belt to arrive at your final idea, and then you can decide from there how you want to resolve it. 3D software modeling I use, all of them, but generally speaking, ZBrush, a little bit of Fusion 360. But yeah, if you want to use Maya, 3D Studio Max, Modo, they're all very varying degrees of edge, face extrusion, and beveling, and booleans. Lag with the move brush in Windows 10. Snakehook brush does mention that. Can you explain why the move brush is so much slower than Snakehook? I haven't had that issue, but I'll report back if that happens. I'm not sure why that would work. The only thing that I've noticed that's been laggy is the bend deformer. I had to be very careful with how many polygons I use with that. I think the idea is Ryan King's ZBrush is being replaced by Substance. Sure, you can if it's a 32-bit displacement that you're working with, yes, but always remember your final output sometimes has to be optimized in engine. There's, I've seen these amazing things where it's like a watch that has like a band, and then you use displacement map to make this high res watch. Well, how do you make the low res? How do you make the maps? What use is it? It's nice to just kind of look at it and go, oh, I do a render. So, like, a high res object isn't the end of the day. Like it is for some industries. Product rendering, I suppose. It's like, okay, here's a high-res object, and then we're done. In video games, especially, high-res object is 1/4 of the work you need to do. So it's not overly useful or overly optimized, or there's a lot of tricks that go into making these things run real time. So as a real-time solution, that can be kind of hit or miss. You can kind of sculpt in Substance. Honestly, if I was going to say if anything's going to replace anything, Houdini's where it's going to happen. It's not going to be simply an image-based program. There's way more functionality within Houdini and its procedural tools than anything Substance can do, just with image-based modifications. Titleable height and textures and noisemaker. I'm trying to make a skin pattern for a micronormal. Yes, you can. In noisemaker, that would just be going into. Boy, where is it at? Surface noise. Just bring your tileable noise in with your alpha right here. This little alpha, just click on it, bring it in, and then you can use your alpha scale to tile it more or less. Cool. Ever try to implement Marvelous Designer into your hard surface models? Yeah, if I wanted to do just like quick covers or wraps or like tarps and stuff, for sure, absolutely. Digital sculpting market being saturated. Well, that's kind of depends on how, like everybody, even on Twitter, they're like, oh, you can watch these people use Blender to sculpt an old man or to sculpt a creature. You can sculpt a creature in anything. And that's why whenever anybody starts in ZBrush, the first thing they do is they sculpt an old man and they sculpt a creature or an alien, because you can't lose. Any organic sculpting program, and I call them like claybrush heroes, there are people who only use ZBrush and all they use it for is like claybrush, Dynamesh, and that's been my workflow for 20 years, and that's all I'm ever going to use, and they're really good at it. But it's only as useful as you make it, So yeah, if all you're doing is like sculpting old men aliens, then for sure you can do that anywhere. Can you unwrap a game character in ZBrush or other software? You can do it in ZBrush for sure. I use a lot of software for retopologizing. There's Topogun and Maya and Modo and 3D Studio Max and ZBrush. There's Houdini. Um, and then as far as like UVs, all of those do great UVs. Hedis UV I use sometimes. So a lot of stuff you can use. What are UDIMs? That one you should look up. That one is it's not complicated. It's just essentially different quadrants for your textures to go. It's more of a film thing, as far as I know. I haven't actually personally used it, but I could give you a really bad explanation of it. You might have to look that one up. You try to retopo in ZBrush or prefer your software for organic stuff? Love Topogun, it's really buggy. Yes, I do a lot of retopologizing in ZBrush. And then I'll do like cleanup in Maya. Maya has a good quad draw functionality. If you go here to my YouTube channel and you do retopo or retop, it will give you tons of retopology examples and using ZRemesher in conjunction with ZBrush's topology to kind of fix it, all that good stuff. Today is chest day, my favorite day. Leg days just murder me, but I'm trying not to have stick legs. And then back is a boring day, but I don't mind it. Chest day is a fun day. I think that's true for most guys. Is chest and arms is fun. Everything else is kind of a drag. But if you like doing leg days, more power to you. That's awesome. I wish I could be that person. How do you replace it in the scene with Commander in the same place after changing the workspace file? Oh, for the proxy mesh on the Commander, what I would do is just do a merge visible. And if I'm doing a lot of ZModeler work, I'll just take that merge visible and throw it in here. If I'm doing a lot of Dynamesh, what I'll do is I'll merge visible, decimation mesh, or preprocess current, decimate it down, and then bring it in. It is a little bit of manual work. I'm not going to lie. I wish I had a more elegant solution. You could maybe use ZRepeat to like do the transformation for you, but yeah, it's not a pretty process. But I don't do it that often. Usually, it's only where these things interact is what I really care about. So I can usually go a month. If I'm working on this guy for a month, let's say, I can just get proxies in maybe every other day. Just take a couple minutes to put that new proxy in. Way to bake displacement, vector displacement without ZBrush. Ooh, that's a good one. I know ZBrush can, but boy, I don't use 32-bit vector displacement that much. But maybe XNormal can, like you said. I'm not positive off the top of my head though. I'm sorry. Any Instalod would be available for normal people. That I don't know. They got some really cool stuff. So if you go to Instalod website, they got some new stuff coming out. So very, very cool. In Unreal integration and the standalone files, or the standalone working thing is cool. So best way to get different resolution for the same object into Dynamesh. Best way to get different resolution for the same object into Dynamesh without local subdivision. Dynamesh resolution should be controlled by that slider, but also, I'm glad you brought this up. So Z plugin over here, if you're ever having problems dialing in exactly what you want for Dynamesh, or if you can't Dynamesh high resolution enough, go into Dynamesh Master and go under additional options and turn on use autoscaler. So you can type in like, I want this thing to be 1.5 million polygons, and you'd hit Dynamesh. With autoscaler off, sometimes it will never hit that. So if you turn autoscaler on, it'll scale your object to where it can Dynamesh at that 1.5 million and then scale it back to where you had it. So you can use this to really fine tune your Dynamesh. 3D coat is good for retopo. There you go. Cool. Alrighty. If I have a twin to 20 million polygon book model and then I need to modify it, but if I Dynamesh it, it crashes the whole mesh. For that, what you can do is in a pinch, if Dynamesh is giving you problems, go in here to Subtool Remesh. Remesh the object. You can turn X symmetry if it's not symmetrical. Remesh the object with a resolution. That'll give you an envelope, and then use project all to subdivide, project. That'll give you a nice envelope, and then when you get your details back, then that remeshed object should be able to be Dynameshed, or you can just use a remesh object. So, alrighty. Wacom settings, I don't have anything special. I just have my Wacom medium tablets mapped at this portion of my monitor. My monitor is gigantic, so I just use a little 1920 by 1080 square in it. And I don't use any of the buttons. I don't use any of the touch functionality. It's just keyboard, Wacom, pressure sensitivity, and that's it. I'm a bad Wacom user. And yeah, reversing that insert mesh. We're going to do controlling curves tomorrow. Sorry about that, Lou. It should just be a matter of, just really quickly, since I know you've asked this question a lot, and I want you hanging around waiting for me to get to it. So really quickly, this will be my last one. I'm going to go to Unmesh Mesh Center here. So I'm going to steal. Let's grab a zipper real quick. So I'm going to say, go to my brush, and we're going to look at where's the zipper at? There's the zipper. I'm going to hit W, and I'm going to steal this closed zipper mesh here, and I'm going to unify this so it, oh, there it is. Boy, it's way over there. What the hell? Let's unify this. Oh, okay, that's my fault. Okay, so this is a tri-part brush here. So if I go to brush, create insert mesh, new, go over here to stroke, curve, turn curve mode on. Now I've got my zipper here, and this is the repeating middle part. If I go and I do this, and I hit brush, create insert mesh, append, okay. Now I have another brush that reverses the direction. So if I tap this one and grab this one, there you go. So those directions are reversed. So now let's say you've already got the curve drawn out. Let's see if this works. So for example, we're going to get into controlling curves next time. We got a sphere, edit, get out of my way. Tool, make polymesh 3D, control shift. So we can go ahead and do like a slice curve through here. Let's do a slice curve through here too. So I'm going to take, actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do this. A little sneak peek for you guys. Make polymesh 3D. W, stretch this out here. And actually, you know what? Let's go to geometry, edge loops. Let's go ahead and delete these loops. Let's go ahead and go into insert multiple edge loops. I'm going to give this some resolution. And then now if I go in here to brush, deformations, we'll do a bend curve, and we'll change that axis here. So now we can use this as like a control curve for our path. And then I'm going to hit Control W, and then we're going to say, let's do a quick group by normals. Isolate this one here, delete hidden. If I want to steal this path, I can do polygroup, polyloop here and here. Isolate this, delete hidden. We're going to do a stroke, curve functions, polygroup. So we've got our border here. So now if I want to put a zipper along this path, I can go to my insert mesh brush and I can tap it. And let's make this bigger. There we go. So now we've got our zipper. It's like, oh, I want to reverse the direction. Just grab your other zipper, tap that curve, and there it is, reversed. Cool. Alrighty. Tutorials for backpacks. I haven't made a backpack tutorial, but it'd be very similar to, I think, if I was to make a backpack or a pouch. You know what? I have made pouches. It's kind of like a backpack. Go to my playlist, the boot tutorial. Here is how I would probably approach it. And I'll even give you something more specific than this. If you go to, my live stream full playlist, there it is, live stream full episodes, and scroll way down. So I started working on this little military dude, and I think even in episode 1 maybe, we go through and I make a pouch somewhere in here. I want to say, or maybe it's one of these episodes I go through and I start making box modeling a pouch. But then I, just like I normally do, I just completely lose interest. I never finish anything, guys. I apologize. But somewhere in there's a pouch. Actually, you know what? Let's see if we just do. Wait for it. No! Channel analytics. Fingers crossed. Mag pouch block out. There you go. 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 All yours. Kind of like a backpack. Alrighty. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Like I said before, these are just going to be dumped on YouTube. You can watch them, but I am going to go through and make a nice playlist and throw it on YouTube so you can a little more searchable. And I'll post it on ArtStation, and then I think that's it. I'll have some new ZBrush startup stuff for you coming out soon. I've got 250 videos for that. So thanks everybody. I will see you later, and see you tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel.